I'm resident of Collinwood for YouTube, Joel Sands. That's my buddy Alan Gallant. That's my buddy Patrick McCray. That's my buddy Daniel Culver. We're here to review the movie My Favorite Year. Now, if you think we've reviewed this movie before, we have. This is a revisited tour of a fun movie. the the guy from Perfect Strangers, one of them, he gets to babysit an actor, and it's hilarious.
Mark Lynn Baker.
Yeah.
His first big role. It was his first big gig.
Yeah. Alan, when did you first see this movie?
I think it was probably within a few months of its premiere.
That's pretty cool.
82, 83, somewhere in there.
I think it was 82 when the movie
came
82
out. Was when it came out. I saw it somewhere either 82 or early 83.
This was back in the days when movies stayed in theaters for a long time, lovely long time. I mean, a movie could be out 3 months and you could still catch it in a theater. Not even a big blockbuster, just a regular movie.
Yeah, we had sister city to Bangor was called Brewer. It's across the river from Bangor, Maine, and they had this Cinerama that had I think it had 4 theaters in it. That was the biggest back then when I was right out of high school, and they would just go down the line. If a movie was first run, it was in either 1 or 2. If it had been going on for a while, they would shift it to 3 or 4 and then put something else in 1 or 2. So, and they would stay for, if they were particularly selling well and popular, they would hang on for a long time. You're right.
Patrick, when did you first see this movie?
I saw it very shortly after it was released. My vague recollection is that it was a Thanksgiving release. I think it was around then, and I saw it very quick. The ads were terrific. They looked like a lot of fun. And this was back when, young people went to see movies about adults. That you did not have to have young characters for young people to go see. And so even though I was 11 when it came out, it was a great film. And it was one of those movies that even then was getting increasingly rare, which was an intelligent movie with a lot of humor, some of it bawdy, and integrity, but that, as loathsome as this sounds, it wasn't a bad thing. Everyone could go see. It was one of these movies that, grandparents could go see, and they wouldn't be too embarrassed by what went on. And they were so charmed by seeing, how the world was when they were in their 50s and 60s, that they were okay with it, and it was engaging and fun enough that young people got to see it. I mean, I don't know if they made another movie like that until Knives Out, but Knives Out kind of was the modern day equivalent of that genre of film. And that's an interesting genre. I almost wish there were a name for it, because it'd be worth writing a book about.
I'm kind of surprised there isn't a name for it.
Yeah.
It's more of a feeling than a genre. I mean, this one in particular that does have that nostalgia quality about it too.
It sure does, which I think helps those films.
Early television era and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Daniel, when did you first see this movie, dude?
Believe it or not, today is the first time I've actually seen it. But yeah, I actually thought it was good, And yeah, it's pretty interesting too. Like, this came out in the 80s, but it takes place in the 50s,
Yeah. And I'm sorry, Alan, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, it's actually the template for the show that they depict in the 50s is your show of shows. Joseph Bologna is playing a sort of a template of Sid Caesar, who was a very famous comedian and television impresario of that era.
The show, your show of shows, was really extraordinary in terms of the writing talent that worked on it. You had Mel Brooks, you had Neil Simon, you had Larry Gelbart, you had Woody Allen, and they were just a few of the incredible writers that were all, working together on this TV show. And it was skit based. Almost the closest equivalent would be Saturday Night Live, which
Mhm.
is a much older format, I think, even though it has a newer voice than it's given credit for. But the funny thing is, so this movie was released over 40 years ago, right? So
That's
more
true.
time has transpired between when this movie was released and now than when the movie takes place
And when the
and
movie
when
was
that
released.
period was.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's interesting.
It was less
Yeah.
than 30 years between 1954 and 1982, where it's now 42 years since the
Yeah.
1982.
So if they made your show of shows now, it would be set around a show like In Living Color.
Yeah.
Would be about the closest equivalent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, it's a skit type show. A lot of which was scripted. Some of it was improvisationally based if they had rehearsal luxuries, but most of it was scripted.
Yes. Yeah. And cue cards, very cue card driven,
Mm-hmm.
because
There's
they're
not a
like
lot of
Saturday Night
rehearsal.
Live, because there's no
Yeah.
way you can memorize those lines.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, this movie was released October 8th, 1982.
There you go.
So,
And back then, that was a Thanksgiving release.
Yeah.
because
It built the audience.
releases rolled out and it kept its audience. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was when you had, God bless it, word of mouth had built up just enough that its business was peaking nearly 2 months later
Mm-hmm.
with Thanksgiving.
Yeah, this was an era that was not blockbuster dependent in terms of, instant weekend receipts and all
Thank
that.
God.
Yeah.
yeah. Here's a question for you guys. Is this Peter O'Toole's best role?
That's a wonderful question. I'm going to field that to Alan while I get some coal.
It's a top 5 for me. Obviously, I think The Stuntman is also a top 5 that we just got done talking about. Lion in Winter is a top 5. He also did some work out of Great Britain. I'm trying to think. He did one movie.
Well, The Ruling Class.
Ruling Class. That's the one I'm thinking of. Right there.
I thought so.
Yeah. Ruling Class, and Beckett, of course. Brilliant work in that. And Lawrence of Arabia. I mean, you can go on and on. He had he probably had probably 8 or 10 films that would be considered top level. But this one, I think this is a top 5 because it gave him a chance to be vulnerable, really vulnerable. And that is not that he couldn't be vulnerable in other roles, but this one in particular, he really showcased his that range of vulnerability, I think. So, yeah, it's top 5 in my book.
Yeah, because there's vulnerability in Lawrence of Arabia.
Of course, it's just a different type of vulnerability, different level.
Yeah, I'd say his vulnerability is more of a person who's scared of what real life represents.
Absolutely. That's the root of his alcoholism. That's the root of stage fright. It's the root of him not getting out of the car to see his daughter the first time,
Yeah.
All of that stuff. Yeah. Afraid of life. Absolutely. The immediacy of life.
Yeah, life's a scary.
He says, "I'm a movie star."
Yeah. Daniel, what do you think? Is this Peter O'Toole's best performance?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not sure. I'm gonna say yes though, but I'm not really super familiar with his work, to be honest.
I'll say it's in the top 5 but it is definitely top 3.
Okay.
It's that good.
Mm-hmm. It's good.
Simply because this is one of those movies. A, it doesn't need remade because B, it's timeless.
Do not remake this movie, Hollywood. Sorry, I didn't interrupt you.
Yeah, so it's timeless because like Daniel pointed out, hey, this movie though made in the 80s, set in the 50s. You have a movie that is literally, in a weird way, almost I'm not saying it juggles both times, but it does a really good again, I was just being, I wouldn't be born until a month later. So I wasn't even born when this movie came out.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it did a very good, I would say, though I wasn't there, it most likely did a really good job of connecting with its audience. Because this movie, I got it right away. And it was, Peter O'Toole sells his ass off. And so does the Mark's character. He does.
Baker, yeah.
Yeah, he, like, if you want to know why, one of the reasons why Perfect Strangers was appointment television, he's one of those reasons. Again, great, two really talented actors working opposite of each other, because he's embarrassed, because this is a comedy about life as well. Mark's character, he's embarrassed of being Jewish, about his family, about how they act,
and what a family they are. I mean,
that's great. Lainey Kazan is his mom.
Oh my God, she's amazing. She is amazing.
Before we move on too much, I'd like to weigh in on the Peter O'Toole's best role.
Yeah.
Because that brings up a really interesting question: is what constitutes a best role? And I think it is a middle ground between of three roads: how hard it makes you work, how much fun it lets you have, and how good you get to look doing it. I would say that is the trifecta of what actors generally seek. And that, often when you're a star, you get to have two out of the three. You work hard, you get to have fun, or you have fun and you look good, or, one of the, but you don't get to have all three. In this one, Peter O'Toole gets to have all three.
Yeah.
It's not the heaviest film, but he gets to do heavy stuff and then recover from it. His character gets to go there, and then pull back, and I love that. So you'd have to ask O'Toole, but I certainly think this is right up there. He made a movie a few years after this that had questionably good, bad moments, but I think maybe as good as a performance, if not better. It's largely forgotten. It's a movie called Creator with Mariel Hemingway, and it's a very, very, very interesting movie. So if you like Peter O'Toole in this period, surprisingly, skip Supergirl.
Surprising.
And which would be a good name for a character. And go for this.
Creator.
Yeah, or Creator. Yeah.
There's a lot of great scenes in this movie. I love how O'Toole's character, they got him strapped to luggage and they're dragging him up the steps.
The physical shtick he gets to do is terrific.
Yeah. What did you guys think of that scene?
It was great.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a movie directed by Richard Benjamin, who's a man who really knew shtick. But he knew it very intelligently, and he still was in touch with his Jewishness, and he was in touch with the world that these characters came from. I mean, he was probably in his 50s, so he was right around the age of Mark Lynn Baker's character, I think, when he was making this movie. He was that age when he entered entertainment,
right,
at that time in the early 50s, however you want to phrase it. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was pretty good too.
Sorry. Richard Benjamin also had a wife who was a creative muse for him, and that was Paula Prentice. And they acted in things together, and they actually had a television show together with Jack Cassidy called He and She in the 60s. So that was, I think, America's first big taste of Richard Benjamin up front, face recognition, was that television show. Which was
Jewel, I'll tell you an interesting Jack Cassidy thing. Are you familiar with Jack Cassidy?
No, I'm not.
Not a real reason you would need to be, because he was more of a Broadway actor than anything else. But he was probably the biggest Broadway actor of his era, just in terms of a song and dance man.
Yep.
And something to look for in Jack Cassidy is this. I believe Jack Cassidy was the template for Nicholas Blair.
Really?
Go back and watch some of the Columbos that he was in.
Okay.
And it would have made sense that Estrado, looking for inspiration for the part, would have looked to the biggest, slickest, most seductive, most charming Broadway actor of his day.
And
Jack
Cassidy and Estrado looked similar too. They're similar physical types. The little mustache that he wore.
Can you see, Alan? Can you see what I'm talking about with that?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And of course, Cassidy would have been familiar to all of those New York actors that were working on Dark Shadows.
Yes,
because he was a stage guy. He was a yeoman stage guy. He'd been in Superman the musical.
I like that show.
That's
the
the year that Dark Shadows started. He was in Superman the musical. So, but he was in a ton of other stuff too. I mean,
Strauss and Adams. It wasn't Buck and Harney. It was Strauss and Adams who did Bye Bye Birdie.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was a big show for Linda Lavin, who sang a wonderful song from it called "You've Got Possibilities." It's the script to that show is really interesting too, because if your only experience with it is that horrible television version from the 70s with Leslie Ann Warren, where they ruined so much about the show, because it's a show that very firmly is set in the early 60s, with that real How to Succeed, snap, crackle, and pop to it.
Absolutely, yeah.
The score is terrific. I think it's superior to Bye Bye Birdie, and the script is very New Yorker. Yes. It's like an Al Hirschfeld drawing come to life, where in the script, Superman's enemy manages to rob him of his powers through psychoanalysis.
It's very urbane script.
It's very urbane, yeah. And that's the show that it is, and it's one of the last shows on my bucket list I would love to do. If I get a flying rig, to hell with Peter Pan, I'm doing Superman.
I'm seeing where they revived Boing Boing. Talk about it
very successfully.
Yes, talk about an era type. It really needs to be in that Pan Am.
You can't do it any other way.
Boeing, but it's that whole era of jet setting and
that's really at the tail.
Dwellers and big, penthouses and various other things. And
that's at the tail end.
Yeah.
Of this era that really my favorite year is at the front of.
Correct. But it's all New York. It's all about New York at this point. Television is all in New York. There's very little of it coming out of LA.
You know what I found out? Carson was in New York until 1972.
He was, and he went back and forth for a few years between Burbank and New York until they decided we're gonna land this baby in Burbank. Yeah, that's true. There's a couple of full episodes from New York back in the 60s of The Tonight Show, back before Doc Severinsen.
What do you have, Milton? Was it Milton DeLugg?
No.
Was that his band leader?
I can't remember his name now. I'd have to go back and look. But apparently he was quite a popular and famous band leader of his era. But
it wasn't Arvo Part. I know that.
No. But he still had Ed McMahon, of course. So you got the obligatory.
Ed needed a job.
Yeah. Every once in a while. So.
Daniel, what did you think about Peter O'Toole's character getting drugged up by strapped onto the luggage?
I'd say it's a pretty good scene. I wasn't expecting it. Actually, at first I was a little confused. I was like, what the hell happened?
But that's where we find out he's not drunk, or not as drunk as he wants him to believe.
He suddenly he marshals his forces.
While you guys were talking, I did look up Jack Kennedy or Jack Cassidy.
Cassidy, yep.
So yeah, he does look like Alan or Humphrey.
Watch him in some Columbos, because he was a frequent killer on Columbo, and you'll see his style.
Well, yeah, there's that, and even though he doesn't have a mustache and a night, he's on something on 1966, and I was looking at the photo of it. And he, even without the mustache, he somewhat does sort of look like Humphrey Allen Australia.
He does.
Mm-hmm. He does. You can find pictures of Humphrey without a mustache too. So
yeah, it's in his bearing and his demeanor.
Mm-hmm. There's a cleverness and this Cassidy was really good at cleverness and malice of a certain sort of sophisticated level. He was a malicious little, he could be malicious, and he knew how to play that excellent.
You know what he would have been great as? He would have made a wonderful Napoleon Solo.
Yes, I could see that, especially when with the fully developed repartee that the show, really got into. That's correct. Most later generations know Jack Cassidy as David Cassidy's father.
Yeah.
And Shirley Jones' first husband, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, he died very sadly in a fire.
He did.
Hopefully from smoke inhalation and not burning.
Yeah, I think he had an alcohol problem, and they think he was probably, unfortunately, he was loaded and dropped a cigarette, which is typical of how a lot of people died in fires in those times.
Yeah. Yeah, my mother used to smoke in bed. Used to scare the hell out of me.
Oh, God. Forget about it, man. It was like everybody. Yeah. I smoked for years, but I never did that because I was always afraid of falling asleep.
I'll tell you what, taking a hookah into the bedroom is something you don't do.
Yeah, with those huge coals on it. Yeah.
That doesn't even sound like a good idea.
No, it's not.
Oh my God! I love how Peter O'Toole's character he takes the fire hose, he ties it around himself.
Oh yeah.
And he goes down. What did you guys think of that scene, Alan?
Well, I think there's two things that's happening here. He's loaded, and he wants to help. I think he wants to help his new friend, and so you get to see that side of him that's not entirely selfish, although it's also, hey, let's have an adventure. So there is an element of self-indulgence in it. But he's also like reliving his swashbuckling days, which are somewhat behind him at this point. Due to his reputation, and they talk about his reputation throughout the film, that he's a no-show because of his drinking and things like that. And of course, that's part of what that's one of the dramatic elements of the plot is what he's doing there. But yeah, he's on a lark, and he wants to help his new friend, and he wants to relive glory a little bit. And he's drunk.
There's and the other element, just to touch on something related to that, is that they had also were beginning to stop making movies the likes of which he was in. It wasn't adventures anymore. It was more sand and sandal epics,
westerns and things like that. Yeah,
you're not going to see Alan Swan in a western.
No.
Jewel, I lost your volume.
Yeah, audio's gone.
Yeah, I did for a little too. Oh yeah, it is gone. Yeah.
Sorry, I was listening to something while you guys were talking.
Oh, okay.
So
those Milli Vanilli albums, right? You got to take a break sometimes.
No, I have only heavy metal albums. Sorry.
Your bookshelves must be sagging. They make them out of vinyl.
Well, it's probably an album, Milli Vanilli. Hell.
Daniel, what did you think of the scene where he ties the fire hose around himself and goes down?
I agree with Alan. It kind of shows his less selfish side, but he also has the thing about it's a new adventure. Yeah, it was pretty interesting, and yeah, it was also the part where he thought he might have died, because of how much he fell, but he it turned out to actually be okay because obviously he had it around him.
Yeah. What did you?
And of course, it was the wrong floor too, which of course adds to the merriment.
Oh yeah, too. Yeah, it was.
The wrong floor. Oh my God. I did find Mark's character's family interesting. They were like, how could you change? His mother's like, how could you change your name to Stone? What kind of name is Stone? This is basically every family humiliation nightmare you could imagine.
Yes.
Yeah.
In a fun way.
And Alan's in his corner.
Yes, he totally is.
Which is so endearing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an opportunity to show that the guy isn't a complete self-involved cad, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's a cad for the right.
He is a cad for the right. He's very charming with the parents and all of that sort of thing. So yeah.
Yeah.
What sort of meat is this that has that piquant flavor? Parrot. I
Yes.
love that line.
Yes.
Daniel, what did you think of Mark, the character, actor
Benji's.
Mark? Yeah,
Benji's family.
Benji's parents.
Yeah, they were interesting, you know. Yeah, that part with the parrot, yeah, you know, like, you know, that wasn't like something I was expecting either, you know, like
No one is. No, certainly Alan Swan isn't.
You know, the Lou Jacoby is one of the great character actors of his generation. He's like,
Lou Jacoby. He's great in everything.
Is a rubber stamp. Oy vey, you got the schmear, the whole 9 yards. I mean, he's it. He's Tevia's father. You know? It's like, why are you moving again?
If you want to see a great Lou Jacoby performance, look up his section of everything you always wanted to know about sex.
Oh my God!
He plays a transvestite who, at a family dinner, who has to escape through a window because he's trying on the hostess's clothes without her knowing it, and his wife's trying to get in the room, so he climbs out the window in drag and has to go around to the and then there's a fire or something. Maybe he's hanging out. They call the fire department. And he's trying to hide his mustache and speak in this falsetto voice.
Yes.
And it's just, God, it's so good. I think Kay Ballard plays his wife in that too.
I would not. I'd have to go back and look at that. But that sounds.
She was an actress of this era.
And she definitely was. Yeah. She was. Yeah. She had a high profile at that point in time too. She had that late '60s series, The Mothers-in-Law, with oh God, Eve Arden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like Benji's narration of the movie too. It doesn't like take anything away, and more adds to this movie. What did you guys think?
It's looking back. It's that nostalgia element of it. He's looking back at those developmental years of his career, of his youth into adulthood, all of that sort of thing. It's a fond look back, and at the center of it is Alan Swan. So.
Patrick?
I like a narrated movie. And, you know, this was a good era for that in terms of that nostalgia. Because I'm also thinking about A Christmas Story.
Yes.
Which handles that really well. And it allows you sort of to have two narratives at once. Because you have who you imagine Benji Stone is now and who he was back then. And it works brilliantly.
Daniel, what did you think of the narration in this movie?
You know, yeah, I agree. I think it was done well, you know. And you know what's interesting is this has a similar concept to A Christmas Story, because you know Christmas Story takes place in the 40s. You know, I know it's based on Gene Shepard's real life as the narrator as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the same concept. You know, that was also made in the 80s, and that takes place in the 40s. You know.
Yeah. Which all culminated, and maybe the reason that we don't hear it as much anymore because it got so well used with the Wonder Years.
Yeah.
I hadn't realized that Christmas Story was somewhat the template for the Wonder Years. And I was having a conversation with someone who worked on the Wonder Years, and he pointed that out. I was like, oh, God, yeah, you're right.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Yeah. What's you guys' favorite scene in this movie? Alan?
Ultimately, there are two scenes that show, and they're towards the end of the movie, that show both sides of the Alan Swan coin. And one is in the he's been driven to Connecticut by his chauffeur, and he can't get out of the car to see his daughter. It's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking, and it's very simply done. There's nothing you know overly sophisticated about it. It's not set up to manipulate you. It's just there it is. It's right there in front of you. Well, it is set up to manipulate you. It's film, but not in an overt way. And then that whole ridiculous scene where the entire set comes down and he shows up and swoops onto the stage, forgetting his terror, and
It's
it's
so
this
good.
moral and personal victory that he has. You know, and
It's so good.
it is so sweet. I almost wept with joy. I hadn't seen it in so long. It was just that good.
Dan. Patrick, what's your favorite scene, man?
Oh, I think those two. I hate to sound unoriginal, but in a film where every scene could be considered by someone to be the best scene, I also like the date that Benji
Yeah,
has
that's
with
really
the fantastic and unbelievably underrated and underemployed Jessica Harper,
hmm
who I think is maybe the most beautiful woman of her generation, and so fresh, so talented, and she maintained that quality for so long. And she writes cookbooks now,
yeah.
and
Oh,
and
wow.
if you go to her website, she looks exactly the same.
Well, that's pretty weird.
Yeah, yeah, she's a doll with an amazing singing voice also.
Yeah.
It goes for miles. If you watch the movie Shock Treatment, which is the sequel to Rocky Horror, she plays Janet in that, the Susan Sarandon part, and she just nails it right through the wall. And her singing in the film, she gets to do a lot of it,
Mhm.
and she has the deepest, richest voice coming out of this tiny person.
That's
And
why
she's the
she
star
had
of
to do a lot of
Suspiria.
singing, I think, too, is because, why not exploit that?
That's right, and she's the star of Suspiria.
Yeah. Daniel, what's your favorite scene, man?
My favorite would be like, at the end, when they started fighting and the fight actually gets on stage, and like, he kind of, and obviously, Alan comes on, he kind of embraces, the audience, I kind of like that. Now, a close second is the one where Benji is saying like every line from the movie, when he's watching it with that, with that lady.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And she's like, stop. He's like, yeah. uh, yeah, the ending, we're all for going to have the ending on them because the ending is that emotional release for Alan, the character of,
hmm
he's, to quote a line from a song, he's worn out always being afraid. That isn't the exact verbiage of the song, but it's close enough.
Yeah.
I also love his really underrated character is the limo driver, Alan's limo driver.
Yes.
I love him to death. That is a great character in this movie. And this is just a fun movie from start to finish. I would dare say, if you asked me to name the 5 greatest movies in the 80s, being there, Stuntman, my favorite year would be number 3. Just those movies alone, bam, bam, bam. They're really great.
They're wonderful films. I mean, they're just marvelous.
Yeah, and they're fun to watch, and it's entertaining from start to finish. The drama, the mixture of drama and comedy in this movie are perfect, pitch perfect, and really, what I love about Peter O'Toole most, because he always, we've talked about how he always shouts. He does shout a bit in this movie. It's like you can't have a Peter O'Toole movie where he's not shouting.
No.
But I feel like O'Toole's in on the joke.
Yeah.
Oh, it totally is. I think O'Toole would refer to it as proclamation and exclamation rather than shouting.
Declamatory.
Yeah.
For sure. But it's so
very
fun.
much his training, his stage training too. It's
Yeah.
very much, that's that part of his stage training that he was able to embrace on film, for sure. I mean, most of it he was able to embrace in one role or another on film.
I think that works for him in film because he's just as good at being quiet.
Mm-hmm.
He can internalize and slow burn so well.
Yes,
and
I
so
think he'd already
intimately.
mastered, even on stage, he'd mastered the ability to show with his eyes, with the tension or relaxation of his face, all of those things that you can do on film.
Another actor that we talk about now and then, who I think is very good at that's Oliver Reed.
Yeah.
He was an untrained force of nature. I mean,
he sure was.
He got his training on his feet, basically. I mean, he got informal training from other actors, directors, etc. But he was not. He was very proud of the fact, I think, and occasionally when he would drink too much, or actually frequently when he would drink too much, he would deride the Oxfordians and the Cambridge people, all of those people, because he was not there. He was very working class and proud of it.
He's really we both know he's great in the Musketeer movie, but Curse of the Werewolf, he's really, really, really good.
Yes.
Ollie is good in everything he does. Some of the films are pretty outrageous. The things they ask him to do.
Yeah,
it's because he has that feral quality. He can do. He can do it. He can go over the edge and sometimes not come back for a while, but he could do it.
His James Bond, he was almost James Bond. I think if he had just had a shade more discipline, would have been extraordinary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the charm is there. The threat is real, because he could be a very threatening person in real life without even trying. I mean, all they do is look at you a certain way. When talk show hosts had him on, they didn't know what the hell they were going to get.
Oh, God, watch him on Letterman.
He just
his wildest. That, and he's on Tonight Show with Shelley Winters, who he infuriates so much she pours a drink on him.
Yeah, I know. He was trying. I think he was trying to piss her off. I don't think
he was
very much. I don't think he liked her at all. But and she reciprocated his feelings. But yeah, and occasionally he would appear on a show roaring drunk, and he would do it on purpose because he felt that people expected that of him. After he got this reputation, people expect this of him, and so he would go on and he would be ha ha ha, and he'd be all happy, and then he'd look at the host and start rolling his sleeves up like he wanted to hit the guy, and this would be his form of entertainment on talk shows.
The one thing no host ever really did was just counter that with unequivocated love.
Yeah.
And really greet him, because that's one thing I noticed about dealing with people who are well into their cups.
Yeah.
That they are not expecting is to deal with them with the amount of affection that you're capable of feeling when you're inebriated.
Interestingly enough, I think it's because he could be so threatening, because he was a physical presence that could break you in half. He was a bull of a man. But then again, you look at somebody like Richard Harris, who's a big, tall, broad-shouldered guy. Yeah. He appeared on, I can't remember whose talk show he appeared on, Cabot's or somebody's. He'd been in a fight the night before, and
I think it was Cabot.
Massive freaking, bruises and scabs, but he's so goddamn charming.
Yeah.
Harris was charming that way. It was like you almost wanted to get in a fight with him, not against him. You wanted to fight with him,
alongside him.
Yeah. But he had charm as well as the physicality of a rugby player. An interesting combination.
Is there anything you guys want to add about my favorite year before we get in?
This is a movie, and we have to stop the discussion at some point, because I think, you could just go through scene by scene,
right,
and just pour love into it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that's true. Oh yeah, one thing I do want to point though is I did recognize the singer. You know how there's the opening. I recognized the singer because he did a Christmas song as well.
Oh, cool.
It's called The Christmas Song. Yeah, I know it's weird. It's a weird name, but yeah. I don't know if you ever heard it. I don't know if you guys listen to Christmas music, but yeah. I noticed it right away. I was like, but I don't really know his name, so I was confused. But I guess it's Nat Cole.
You mean the Nat King Cole?
Yeah, it's chestnuts roasting on an open fire.
Yeah,
that's Nat King Cole does a version of it, and
the song in this film, that begins it, is truly one of the great, Stardust. And it's considered one of the most complex songs written, because the melody just kind of traipses all over the place, but it's always beautiful.
Yeah, and always comes back to that familiarity.
Yeah,
it's a great standard. Yeah,
a perfect song to begin the film with.
Mm-hmm.
especially then going into that snappy jazz.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, go check. Go. There's going to be a link to the National Archives for my favorite year. Go check out this movie. It's a
Jewel,
perfect.
if you can find it, you might want to drop a link to Richard Benjamin's episode of the podcast called Gilbert Gottfried's Amazing Colossal Podcast, which is a wonderful show for one thing. He talks to Tom Savini, he talks to Dee Wallace, talks to everybody, and he really gets into the fun side of gossipy nitty gritty, and he gets these stars to speak very honestly about what they did. And Richard Benjamin has wonderful stories about making my favorite year, because this is his first movie as a director.
Right.
Is it on YouTube?
It's not on YouTube, but the link is probably out there somewhere to Stitcher or iTunes or something.
Okay, I'll
So
try.
you can at least find the link.
I'll try to.
Yeah.
Definitely. There is also going to be a link to Oliver Reed's talk show about appearances.
The Letterman one is out of this world. It's really bizarre.
There's a bunch of them on YouTube for sure, and some of them are harrowing, and some of them are hilarious.
But there's also going to be links to these three gentlemen's Alan Gallant's YouTube channel, Call Sport After Dark, Patrick McCray's Dark Shadows Day Book of Bow. Go check it out if you haven't already. And my buddy Daniel Culver, Killenberg's channel, Killenberg. Go check him out on YouTube as well. Gentlemen, this was a blast. Have a great day.
It was. Thank you.
If
Good
you-
night.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.